I'm Dane Sanders, and I want to welcome you to Fast Track Coaching Ask Dane. This is the, I think, 81st episode of Ask Dane, and really excited to invite our guest on here in just a second. As you guys know, if you've been a long-time viewer, these are 30-minute conversations between myself and a special guest around different ways to move the needle of your creativity and your business. And it's a very tight time frame for us to talk about a lot of different things, and it's meant not to be something that you spectate on. It's meant to be something that you engage in, where you're an active participant. And I hope today is no exception to that. The way to participate, because this is a vocal event, is there's actually, and by the way, thanks to the vocal folks for customizing our player and making it look all sweet. We're really stoked on how those guys work with us on a regular basis. And by the way, we have a special announcement for you guys that we're not supposed to let you guys know about today, but we'll be letting you guys know about later on today, that I think you'll be especially interested in. But a big thanks to the folks over at Vocal to allow us to take questions live, both text questions and video questions. Sometimes when we do the Ustream events, you have to Twitter questions to @DaneSanders, and we pick those up and ask those questions. But this is far more interactive, where you get to really play a role. And the way you do that is you click the little light bulb in the lower right corner, and once you click the questions, you can either type in text questions or actually set up your video camera and join us in the conversation live from wherever you're at in the world, and we can join in. So for the brave among you, go for that. For those of you who want to write the text questions, that's also very brave. But all of you folks who are just spectating, I don't want to say shame on you, but I do want to say there's a lot more value out of getting in the conversation than not. So I'm going to go ahead and tweet out that we're live right now, and if you guys could do the same, we're going to bring on my new friend in just 1 second. I'm not very good at multitasking, so I'm going to have to do one thing at a time. And my guest is laughing at me. Just 1 second. By the way, if you guys hear a lot of noise throughout the conversation, these guys are fantastic, but moments before we started, I broke a window in my studio, and the fine folks over at Newport Glass ran over and are saving the day right now, so they're very gracious to do that late on a Tuesday. So if it gets a little loud, please forgive me. I'll try to mute it so it won't be that big a deal. Come join us. Okay, so my guest today is Lara Casey, and we are very privileged to have her. I think that the reality of business is a very complex thing, and when I think of all that Lara Casey does for our industry, the way she inspires so many people, she has several thousand Twitter followers, and just people who look up to her as a leader in our industry with all the different initiatives she's taken on. We're going to dive in pretty deep on what it takes for anyone to get up and go in business, but to do it at an exceptional kind of peak performance level. And we're going to get into that conversation in just a second. But first off, I just want to try to multitask poorly and bring on my friend. Here she is.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Hi, Lara. Welcome to the show. Absolutely. I've been a fan of yours for some time, and nice to call you a friend now. And I'm wondering, for folks who are not as familiar with you and what you've done, if you could kind of give a little bit of a general scope of the kinds of projects you've been a part of over the years, and in particular the things that you're involved in right now, as they would be interesting for photographers in particular, but creatives in general.
Yeah, sure.
For them to get to know you a little bit.
Started a company. And about 5 years into that, we started to think about doing something that would really inspire local vendors, and we really just wanted to start with something small. So we started a blog, and this was right around the time when blogs were picking up, and I only remember hearing about Style Me Pretty or some of those other big ones at the time. So we started the Southern Weddings blog, and the magazine was born out of that. So we've had Southern Weddings magazine for about 2+ years now. We're working on our 3rd issue, and through all my relationships with photographers and other vendors in this market, I started to really find a passion for helping people grow in business and helping people conquer fear. So I started Laura Casey Reps about a year ago, which is my consulting firm. So I've got my hands in a lot of things, but I'm very grateful for all that we do.
Well, so tell me more about the idea of running simultaneous businesses in the same industry, where on the one hand you're consulting and running events, and then simultaneously turning to those partners that you work with. I do similar work in certain categories, but when you say consulting, can you tease that out a little bit more so people can see a little bit of what you would bring to the table for folks when they would get into a conversation?
Well, there's two levels to this. One is to do an in-person consult, and that's what I do with the Making Things Happen workshops. And that is more, I can't really think of another way to frame it, but it's more of a life coaching aspect where we talk about people's fear in business, the action steps they need to take to really make things happen in their lives and in their business. And then on a day-to-day basis, I take about 20 phone consults a week where we talk more about portfolio review and, from my perspective as an editor, what I would want. Also my perspective as a long-time event planner. So I've been on the other side of it for many years now. Still feel very new in this, but it's been really fun so far.
On your blog, it's funny, I'm going there right now, and one of the fun things about working on Vocal is I get to kind of sign my face off and Twitter and type and jump in the conference and then come back out. I mean, there is so much going on, and one of the kind of overarching themes, and it seems like a lot of your posts, whether it's trips that you're participating in, collaborations that you're part of, the magazine, things that you're inspired by, it just seems like so much of the site is a series of, it's kind of a reflection of your values and the things that are important to you. Yet, what is it that, even though first off, is that true? And then second, especially given the amount of comments, I mean, 28 comments, 30 comments, 71 comments, 34 comments, 40 comments after each, 123 blog comments after each post, what is it about you talking about the things that are important to you in your life that is connecting the dots for other people where they're like, yeah, I want to be a part of this conversation? Does that conversation make sense?
I think it's a lot of things, and it's been, yeah, absolutely. It's been a really amazing journey, my blog. I was very scared to start my blog. I started it at the same time I launched Laura Casey Reps, which was about a year ago. And I really just wanted a place to house all of my thoughts and my fears and the things that I struggle with as a business owner, because I felt like people were getting the perception that the things that I've done, and yes, granted, I've had a very quick path to success, but people get the perception that it's very easy to do that, or that I don't struggle, or that people that have some degree of success don't go through the daily. I tell you what, I am very sensitive, very, very, very sensitive. I still get very upset by emails that I get, or negative comments from people. So I really wanted a place to show people part of the struggle that I have, and it's tough. I mean, there's a fine line between sharing too much personal information and still staying in a professional realm, but I really try to push that envelope because I see how valuable it is for people. So that's one reason that I'm very motivated to share so much like I do, is that I really feel like people connect with that.
It's interesting. There's a lot in your comments, and I can relate. I certainly have far thinner skin than I like to say that I do, and it often comes out in the inopportune moments in life. And for me, at least this year, for the first time, I began to experience a little bit of the kind of the underbelly of our industry, of folks who were kind of, I'm guessing, I make it in my head, kind of lonely, hurting people that in that kind of isolationist place, they're not really interested in a conversation, even if it's a dialogue where we disagree, but they're really interested in being kind of hurtful, or just kind of sending out these really harsh remarks or whatever. And when I first started hearing those in my direction, I tell you what, it was taxing. I was very distraught about it. I was like, what does this mean? And it took a lot of coaching from other folks in my life to just kind of get some perspective. And at some moments, at least in my own dark experience and my own sensitivities, I was really tempted to just go, well, screw it. Like, I'm out of this thing. I don't like the people in
Yeah.
this industry sometimes. And I'm wondering, do you ever face that,
Oh,
that kind
totally.
of temptation too, to just be like, well, what's the we do all this work in one direction to try to help and support, and yet sometimes even if people don't like what we're doing, the way that they respond can be so discouraging.
Well, it's funny you say that because I think that's one reason why I've been able to handle a lot of that, is the way that I started this. Right when we had put out our first issue, we had gotten a circulation deal from a really big circulation agent. It was kind of like the American dream for me in a way. All the pieces kind of fit together. I'm not at all. I didn't go to school for publishing. I didn't go to school to learn how to use InDesign. I do all the magazine layouts myself. So I was kind of self-taught and self-made. And so I really had my heart invested in this magazine. And right before we went to newsstands, I got a cease and desist letter from someone that said that our magazine name was too similar to theirs. And this was a company that I really
Wow.
looked up to and someone that I really, really admired, and they were coming after me. And, without going into too much detail, of course, I really tried to do all the right things. I had
Hmm.
applied publicly for a trademark and gone through all the processes I was supposed to do, but I missed a loophole in this. So that's kind of how we started. And I really thought that the floor was going to fall out from underneath me at that point. And that was the moment where I really had to face a lot of my fears in moving forward and say, Laura, do you really want this? Why do you want this? Why would you put yourself through this? Why would you keep going with this? And it was like everything in my body was saying, no, don't go through with this. Don't move forward. There's too much pain ahead. This is how you're going to start. But something in me said, you know what? I have to do this. I've got to push through, and this is going to be my way to connect with people in a deeper way. So I did, and I'm very thankful for that. So now every time something like that happens, or I get a silly email from someone, which doesn't happen very often, I think about that time, and I think, you know what? If I conquered that, I can do
Right.
this.
No, that resonates with me. It's funny you say the cease and desist letter. I don't know if that's like a rite of passage for people who try to be entrepreneurial,
I
that
think it must
you have to
be.
go through that at least once. But my podcast that I started quite a while ago called Simple Photo Minute, I had a similar situation where somebody initiated with me in a wholly different direction, and they asked me to take that down, and it was so discouraging because it felt so grassroots what I was creating,
Right.
and it was just a battle I wasn't ready to fight. But it did kind of offer a little bit of a thickening kind of experience, and you're right, it does seem to come in waves, doesn't it? Where there's moments where it's tougher than others. But I guess
Definitely.
what I'm most interested in, I'm guessing go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Okay. What I've noticed for the folks that are listening in is that regardless of the form that the opposition comes in, where it feels challenging, or kind of the obstacles that seem to be showing up, at least in my life or in your life, I'm wondering what kind of personal self conversation you're having with yourself in those moments,
Yeah.
to kind of overcome. Because I get in a lot of conversations with photographers who are struggling right now. The economy's tough, things are challenging, and they're desperate. They're in a hard place, and they're trying to find a new way, a new direction in what seems like an eroding path. And I'm wondering if you could comment a little bit on that, on the importance of that kind of self-dialogue to keep perspective in a way that's most constructive. And I'm not meaning like kind of pop psychology
Yeah,
stuff,
no, I
like
understand.
I'm okay, it's okay, but more like on a deeper level. How do you address that kind of?
Well, that's one reason actually that I wrote a blog post last November called How to Make Things Happen, is that people kept asking me that question. They said, well, when I'm facing all this adversity, and as a small business owner, as someone that is, and as most photographers are, single business owners who are essentially home alone in an office all day without enough support to really get through some of this stuff. So I wrote this post called How to Make Things Happen, and it was all based on, it took me like 2 weeks to write this post, because I really had to dive deep and say, okay, Laura, really, how do you overcome this adversity? How do you really do this? And for me, it's probably like 5 different keys that I use to this. One is definitely in facing your fears, and That sounds like a very esoteric type of concept, but it's really not. It's take a piece of paper out and write down what you're afraid of. And sometimes, literally just seeing it written out is all that it takes to dissipate that fear and make it melt away. I think it's really easy, especially for photographers and, like I said, single business owners, to get in your head. If you're sitting there at a desk all day editing, then you've got nothing to take your mind off of, what this pain or that struggle is at hand. So definitely writing it out, talking it out. Also, the people you surround yourself with. I think there's so much negative dialogue in the wedding world at times, and it's so important to surround yourself with people that are going to build you up, that are going to encourage you, that are going to believe in you, and that are also going to challenge you. That's a big one. And that's one reason I feel really grateful to have the people I do in my office. Catherine and Emily are great at not only encouraging me, but they will stand up to me and say, you know what, Laura, I'm not sure if that's the best idea, or let's think about this from another angle. So those two things. And then also, it's funny, all my clients ask the same thing essentially without actually saying it. They always want to know, am I good enough? And my goal and my passion, my job, is to get them to answer that question without me having to put the words in their mouth. And to get them to answer that question with a resounding yes, without me having to say, yes, you're good enough. So I think it's a matter of, and really the basis of all the work that I do and the heart that I have behind this is to show people their best and to show them that they do have value, to show them their passion, and that that's what they should be investing in most, because it's what gives them the confidence to do their best work. So kind of a long-winded answer, but yeah.
Not at all. I think we need to kind of have some depth to these answers, because I know right now there are folks listening, guaranteed, who are in a really rough place, and you know who you are if you're listening, and you're hearing voices in your head that just aren't helpful. They're related to fears, they're related to concerns about adequacy, second guessing what you're up to. And I can relate to the conversation that you're describing, where people are just dying for someone else outside of them to say to them, "You're okay, you're good enough." And it's almost like a human being dilemma to crave that really badly. But I guess what I'm struck by that is, at least for me, if I can become an affirmation junkie, where I'm just kind of running around to the next person and like, okay, will you say something good about me? Will you say something good about me? And then the reality is, it's not very, it doesn't really scratch the itch. It feels like cotton candy, and I'm really starving for good nourishment, and I'm just chowing on cotton candy and like, oh wait, I just need some more. And it seems like that there needs to be something that comes from within that isn't just more, you're okay, everything's fine, let's tickle your ears. Does that resonate with you at all when I say that?
Definitely. And I feel like there's so much temptation to fall into what you just said, which is needing affirmation all the time and needing validation all the time, especially with things like social media or blog comments, or falling prey to wanting that affirmation over and over from people. And it's so fleeting. So, I mean, for me personally, it's amazing. And I fall into that all the time too. I won't lie. I mean, when I start to get lots of blog comments, I'm like, yes, I did a good job. I did a great thing here. But
that's right.
The matter is, the things that you do in private and the things that, the relationships that you have in private are so much more lasting and so much more valuable. So I really think, at least for photographers, it's about getting to the core of why you do what you do. And that means, and I'm sure, Dan, you probably talk about this a lot, but getting to the core of that connection that you have with your client. Because really, when it comes down to it, nothing else matters. And your best work is going to come from the most authentic connection that you can have with that person or that couple. Magic happens from that. I mean, it's all about listening and the give and take between two people. So I feel like there's a lot to be said for just letting your guard down and saying, okay, let me just take this person in for a minute. And then you start to find that confidence again. So you start to really act from an authentic place, and you see that you really do have the ability to be an artist in that way. So.
Well, I'm listening very carefully to what you're saying, Laura, and I would like to take you up on that request, because I want to ask you some questions that are more personal.
Go for it.
Okay, and these actually aren't going to be from me. They're from our friends who are watching. And there's a bunch of them here. There's one I saw earlier that struck me. Let me see here. Well, I don't know where it went, but the question was basically on your own level, just to keep it personal. What are some of your deepest fears? What are spaces and places that get in your own way, that you could give a tangible example that you've overcome recently that we could?
Definitely. Well, I think one of the biggest things I struggle with a lot lately is being bold and really putting myself out there, whether it's through my writing or through really expressing my opinion to people. I tend to stay in a very safe place. I obsess over blog posts. If you wonder why I don't blog very often, it's because like the post I put out last night took me 18 hours to put together. So I get very afraid of putting myself out there, and it's because I'm aware that I share a lot of personal information, but I do it for a reason. I do it because I know that it helps me connect with people, and so that's one thing, is putting myself out there. And I guess going along with that is the feeling of being exposed, and I hear that a lot from other people too. It's the feeling of, or the fear of, people seeing that you're not enough, or you're not an expert at something. I never claim to be an expert at anything for that reason. I feel like I know a lot of truths about my life from my own experience, but I try to shy away from that. So I have a lot of fear. That's why I talk about fear a lot on my blog too. But yeah.
Well, and I think it's one of the reasons why so many people are drawn in, is because you are courageous. I mean, that's the irony. The having of the fear isn't the issue, is it? It's the what do you do with it. And for you, I think the reason why so many folks are inspired by you is your willingness to say, yep, there it is again, and everyone can relate to that because that's the human condition. But for you to face it and identify it and, like you say, write it down or go after it. I had a fantasy once, and I won't say it online because I don't like to cuss gratuitously, but I had this fantasy of getting a T-shirt that just said "F fear," and because fear it's not. It's
I need one of those days.
I do. Well, maybe we'll bring them to market. Okay. But I think that there is something about that, and I think there is something also. You mentioned this earlier about just being in a community of support. And one of the questions that came up from Megan Cherie Floyd, I'll just put it up here. She asked the question: what are some suggestions for getting more positive support? And along those lines, this is another question that came up from Karen Stott. Asked the question: what if you don't have people around you that are supportive because you live in the boonies? And I don't buy that one so much, given our modern day technology. But what encouragement would you give to folks who maybe they don't have the most positive voices going on in their life, and they really do want to surround themselves with kind of a more constructive conversation? And really, in many ways, that's what the hope of Ask Dane is that this would be a once a week, you can count on it conversation where we're not going to beat you up, we're going to build you up. But for folks like in your everyday life, because I know for me, online is great, but I still need somebody to have coffee with who's real, who I can give a hug to, and is tangible. What advice would you give to those?
So this is a big one for me. I mean, I fully believe in the power of having mentors and having people that you look up to all the time, whether they're people that are actual friends of yours or people that you pay to be in your life to give you expert advice. But on the other side of that too, I mean, the question about living in the boonies, I can definitely relate to that. I lived in a small town for a long time. I think it's important to study success, and through the internet or through great books, it's really easy to do that. Find people that you really feel like hold the values that you do and have carved a life that is something that you admire, and study them. Through social media, it's great because we can start to interact with people on that level. For instance, when I started on Twitter, I was amazed that I could have access to people like Mindy Weiss or Preston Bailey, or all these people that I really looked up to. So I think social media for sure, definitely studying success through people's biographies, really getting to know them in that way. Of course, nothing replaces in-person communication with someone. Networking events, that's a big one for me. A conference that I absolutely love, and I've really attributed a lot of our success to it because of the relationships I've built there, is the Engage conference. And it's run by Rebecca Grinnells and Catherine Arce, and it's really just a meeting of the minds in the luxury wedding business. And I've really met people there that have changed my business and changed the course of my business. And of course, there are very inexpensive networking events you can go to too. Even host your own and try to find people in your area that might have the same passions or interests as you. So there's so many different ways to reach out, but the most important thing is to just do it. Just put yourself out there. And I know it's easier said than done, but for me, my big philosophy is all about action. You really have to physically make a step towards something to really make something happen. You can't just think about it. Thinking about it's great, but physically making that step, reaching out to someone, even in a subtle way, like saying hello on Twitter. I've met a lot of great friends through that way. So, yeah, lots of good ways to do it.
You know, it's funny you say that. I'm reminded right now because I have someone who I count as a significant relationship in my life, a guy named Jed Toffer, Jed and Vicky. I don't know if you know them or not, but they're people who are very much stepping out in life. They're about to get on a plane in the next literal hours to go adopt their daughter from Nepal.
Wow.
And this is a couple, it's incredible. And I know they're listening because I made Jed record today's event. But for all the folks that are listening in and are conscious to, I don't know if you're the praying type or you're the supportive type or you like to send the vibes or whatever you do, it would be a huge encouragement when you see people that inspire you like Jed and Vicky do to me, who don't just talk about like, wouldn't it be cool if we did something for people in other parts of the world or whatever, where they take tangible action at significant cost and expense to their life, not just for the moment of today, but I mean, they're making an investment that's going to be a multi-decade, whole life kind of deal, where they're going to sink money, time, and their heart. And when I see that kind of thing, it's inspiring to me, and makes me want to be a better person because I see that stuff in action. So when you see that stuff in action, my encouragement to you guys is to pause and notice it, affirm it, say it out loud. Like, there it is. I want to be like that. There it is again. I want to be like that.
Definitely.
And I want to say that right now, that there Jed and Vicky are. I want to be like them. And I think that on some level, what you're describing of reaching out, whether it be informal context like the like an event like Engage, or even as a trade show or a networking event, those are fine. But there is something about the organic, like just you see it and you name it, and I can't tell you, at least in my experience, that's where I've seen the bulk of my the value show up in my own life, is when I've just named it, and yep, there it is. And that somehow is an invitation to get into someone's life that I've been pretty grateful for. In fact, it's funny, there's some other questions in here that I'd love to address, unless you want to comment on what I just said. I kind of went on a little sermon relative to Jed and Vicky. But.
No, I totally agree with that, and it's funny you say that too, because some people claim to not have a lot of bravery in their hearts, but I get emails from people that will respond to, something small I said in a blog post, and they reach out to me and they just pour their hearts out to me. And those are the kinds of moments where I say to myself, these people have no idea how brave they are. Think about how many people wanted to send an email, or in another context wanted to reach out and introduce themselves to someone. I really admire when people do stuff like that. So it could be a small action or a big one, going off to adopt a child, or even as small as sending an email to someone that you really admire, just to say, hey, I'd love to get to know you better. There's so much power in that.
Funny you say that, because we would get a question right now from Karen Scott again, or Karen Stott, forgive me, Karen. And she says, will Lara bring her workshop to Oregon? Dane was brave enough, but most people don't come here. And I thought that was a very brave question to assert.
Definitely.
And I just want to assert, let me just say this really quickly. Regardless of what Lara says right now, some of the reason why Lara's on the show right now is because from a distance I was watching her and what she's been up to, and we've just been super impressed with her and just reached out, and I was so humbled and honored that she responded. And it turned out that we appreciated both of what we were doing from a distance, so that kind of opened up a great conversation. And I just want to go on the record, Lara, that if you say yes to Karen right now to anything to do with Oregon, and you're looking for a partner in crime, I'm your guy, and it would be fun to collaborate with you. But I'll let you answer Karen's.
Well, Karen, I am definitely in. I would definitely love that. And it's funny, we actually, in our 13 city tour that we did this January with the Making Things Happen tour, we went to Minneapolis, which to me is a relatively big city, but so many people said no one ever comes here. So we had the best time with those people, and I really feel like they were more invested than other cities because they just appreciated us being there. But absolutely, Oregon, love it.
It's funny you say that about Minneapolis. I was there literally like 3-4 days ago, and they said the same thing to me. I think there's
That's
like
right.
3.5 million people in Minneapolis, and you guys are crazy to not go there. It's an incredible city.
I know.
I guess, believe it or not, we're almost out of time, but there's a couple more questions I want to jam through. One, because he is always on the video call, and I always want to honor this guy, Chris Dowsett. He's from Canada, and he is always a brave man to jump on the call, and he's got a good question about facing fear.
Go, Chris.
So let's bring him on the call right now. Let's see here. Hey, Chris, are you there?
I am here. I can't see myself. Can you see me?
All right. We can't see your beautiful face, but you can go ahead and ask your question.
All right, sounds good. Even though I did the hardware setup, I guess I pretty much just wanted to ask a question about facing fear, because one of the things that I had done before I'd gotten into the photography business is convince myself that it was like almost a mantra that what people think of me is none of my business. And it's one thing is to be ignorant of other people's opinions, because it's your opinion of yourself that matters most. So the hardest thing about that in the photography business is what people think of you really is the core of your business. And it's a really give and take thing to deal with, because you don't want to get yourself down or constantly be worrying about what people are thinking about your blogs or your shots, because you'll never think you're good enough, or if you do video, whatever video, this and that. But pretty much what I have to convince myself of is you almost have to hide your own fears and maybe deal with one at a time, or deal with them just as they present themselves instead of facing them all at once. And as for the method that I try to live by, like with something like this, even Dane says, you have to be brave to ask the video questions, but realistically, the challenge that I face in being a photographer, I'd like to be a guest on this show, just have me and Dane and have him want to talk to me personally one day, right? And
come on, Chris, you're a guest every week. Come on.
My goal isn't I can't be afraid to do something like this if I want to deal with major commercial clients, and if I want to deal with major corporate businesses and stuff. A video, as much as don't get me wrong, my heart beats every time this video comes on, even though I'm not on video, just voice today. I still get nervous, but I have to, if I realistically have to, want this dream, I have to be able to chip away at it like this. So do you think it's healthy to hide these kind of fears to take action?
Well, great question.
Important thing is for you to identify it, definitely. And like I said, there's a moment when people talk about facing fears, it sounds like a very reckless thing. It sounds like, okay, I'm going to be up against a grizzly bear, but it's really not like that. It's a very small, almost painful moment. And that's why I always say, do something very simple, like write down the fear. And if you can actually get those words out, I can tell you that it is so much harder to write your fear down than it is to feel it sometimes. So, another thing to remember too is that you aren't your fears, and they do not define you. And like you said, it's very difficult to separate yourself, especially in a very visual business. From my experience, I spent a good portion of my life in theater, and so I was my own instrument. And I spent 20 years training myself to sell myself. And it was very difficult, and it's very hard to deal with rejection when you're the one being rejected, and when for you your art is the thing essentially, in essence being rejected. So it's twofold. One, I think you definitely need to separate yourself from the criticism in a healthy way, not of course closing yourself off, but I think it's very good for photographers to ignore the competition in that way and just focus on work that makes you want to excel, not work that is on your level and not your competition. I think that really tends to muddy things. So I don't know if that helps at all, but first of all,
it does.
I commend you for being on the show every week. That would scare me too. So.
You know, I love your response, Laura, because it sounds as though you're saying that there is a degree of kind of compartmentalization, but at the same time, there's also a healthy call to, like, if you don't face it, it's still going to have power over you. Just by kind of avoiding it or swishing it off to the corners isn't necessarily the best way to go.
It's going to eat you up. Mm-hmm. Right, and it's really just going to stay there too. That's the thing, is that fears are always going to stay there until you do something about it. So there are layers to this. And if you just chip away one by one, again, it's not like you'd said, Chris, healthy at all to sit there and try to face all your fears at once. You're not going to sit down with a notebook and write down every single fear and then you're done. There are layers to this. There's healing to this. There's a process to this. It's a lifelong process. I guarantee you, when I'm 90 years old, I'm going to have fear about something. So I think it's important just to day by day conquer those fears in little ways, and those little tiny things are going to add up. I think it's a big misconception a lot of people have about making big things happen in your life, is that you have to take these huge leaps of faith. Yes, there's a lot of that in there, but it's also about the little tiny small actions that you do every day that build up into those things and that give you the confidence to get those wheels turning.
Let's talk a little bit about the other side of fear, when people get to a place of confidence. And I don't mean arrogance with that. I mean a sense of they know who they are, and even if they're humbly knowing who they are, they're willing to step out from that kind of place of authenticity like you described, or to have integrity with themselves. They're not going to crumble underneath the pressure of criticism or their fears. When those things come into play, can you describe how you would define confidence? I know one of the Twitter users asked this question, photographer confidence, what is it to you? It's a recurring theme with successful photographers. And you even mentioned earlier this idea of tracking successful people and seeing kind of what are their habits, what are their ways of being. What are some of the things that you've noticed about confident creatives, not just necessarily photographers, but people who seem to be comfortable in their own skin and aren't necessarily kind of swaggering superstars?
Yeah. Well, I think there's a lot to be said for never feeling like you've arrived. I think when you feel like you've arrived, you have definitely missed the boat. There's, in photographer confidence, the way I frame that in my mind in a healthy way is someone that is able to recognize their success, but still always has a passion and desire to keep learning. And I don't know, I definitely get to some points in my life where great things happen and I get really excited about it and I feel like, the cock of the walk, but I have to gently remind myself that celebrating that success is important, but also learning from this and being humble in this, there's a deeper lesson in that. So I think it's always focusing on the journey of where you are, not on arriving at a destination. If you reach one of your goals, that's great. Now it's time to move to the next step. So I think it's a constant evolution in that. But yeah, the people that you look at that are, supposedly successful, that are always bragging about what they're doing or talking about how many weddings they've booked, all that stuff, that to me is just a sign of insecurity. It's someone that is just trying to put that out there to get validated by someone else. So it's important to remember that even though those people are saying these great things that they're doing, you can do the opposite and have, a more humble reaction to those great things that happen in your life and still be able to feel good about them. But yes, on another note, it's very important to still celebrate success. Great. And I don't think that people do that enough, especially photographers. I don't think you guys celebrate what you do enough. I get emails all the time from people, especially through submissions, where people would say, I'm so nervous. This is my first time submitting to someone. I'm really grateful that you're the one on the other end of this. And I'm always happy to oblige and send them a personal response. But I know they don't get that from a lot of people. So, yeah, I just think it's really important in that way.
That's great. Well, believe it or not, we're actually already over time, and I want to be sensitive to your time. We do have a handful, like 3 or 4 more questions. Sure. Would you be open to us going a little over time and taking this really quickly? Okay. Okay, so M. Thomas asked a question. Laura, what one important step would someone take in finding their audience in marketing?
Good question.
And we can take these ones pretty quick.
Yeah, this is an easy one. I think you have to identify who your target bride is. And I'm assuming you're a wedding photographer, but this is something that people do not do. And it amazes me when I sit down with a client and I ask them, okay, who's the bride you're targeting? They'll say, oh, I want a luxury bride. Or I want a high-end bride. Well, what does that mean to you? You need to profile your client, profile that ideal client. And the reason why this is important in marketing is you can't know how to market or what avenues to take until you know exactly who you're marketing to. So down to the nitty-gritty of where do they shop, what do they drive, what kind of clothes do they wear, you know, what is their day structured like. If you're targeting a bride who is a 9-to-5er, who say has a second degree, who is a hard worker, maybe owns her own business, she's not necessarily going to be reading blogs in the middle of the day. So there would be one thing you would want to structure differently, is to maybe have blog posts go out between the hours of, say, 5 a.m. and 7 a.m., the time when she sits down to read her paper and drink her coffee. So little stuff like that. It's really important to just know who that person is.
That's great. Another couple more here. It's so funny. I'm jumping back and forth between this conversation and the one in the conference area, and it's fun to hear people interacting. In fact, what's fun is a lot of folks in there right now are actually twittering their at names and say, hey, follow me, whatever. But it doesn't, the flavor of it, if you get a chance to look at it later, Laura, you'll get it. They're actually bonding and connecting around the very things that you're describing, which is really, it's really fun. They're taking your advice right away. That's great.
Good. Well, you guys hit me up on
here's
Twitter.
A kind of pragmatic. That's great. And by the way, my assumption is you guys are already doing that. It's at Laura Casey, Laracasey, and I sure hope she gets a lot of that affirmation when this is done, because I love the questions you're taking. Here's another question from Damaris Mia. It's kind of a pragmatic one, and it's kind of worded uniquely in that how do you get your blog readers to interact with you on your blog by leaving comments and such. And I know my response is I can't make my blog readers do anything. I invite them to. But how would you respond to that kind of a question?
I think there's several ways to do this, but a really easy one is to give them something not necessarily personal. Of course, you want to draw the line wherever that's comfortable for you, but something that conversational that they can respond to. End blog posts with a question, or start a blog post with a question or a subject that you know is going to ignite some conversation. And something I really love to do is to actually create a conversation in the comment section of my blog. So when someone leaves me a comment about something, I don't just let it sit and let it be stagnant. I'll actually write them a comment back. So there's a kind of a life and a community going on there. And I don't know, to me that is the most important thing about my blog, is that it does stay a conversation.
One other question here, and this is actually related to the wedding industry. She says wedding photography in particular, but Meredith Williams asked the question, where do you see the wedding photography heading in the next 5 years, and maybe the wedding industry? And I'm really intrigued by this question because there is a lot of speculation in a lot of different directions in other genres within photography. But with the wedding industry in particular, it seems like there's some unique dynamics in play. And I'm curious if you have any thoughts on that relative to the economy and how folks might want to listen to your thoughts on this.
Sure. Obviously I'm not a wedding photographer. I'm a guest in your wonderful visual world. But from an editor's perspective and from the business perspective that I see, and I'll tell you what, Rebecca Grinnells is definitely the expert on this. I see there being a lot of competition. I think people are definitely stepping up their game. I won't say that that means that we're going to have less wedding photographers cropping up or less bad business cropping up because of that. But I think that the average bride is much more savvy now. They expect more. They expect you to over-deliver. And that's a big concept I try to drill into my clients, is the concept of over-delivering. And what does that mean? That means not just presenting people with a list of services, but you really have to give them an experience. And for me, that's where I hope and I pray that the wedding industry moves, is to give couples more of an experience rather than just a bullet point list of services. Here's your print, see you later. I really, from my end, I would love to be a bride and know that I am taken care of from start to finish, and that I'm going to build relationships with those vendors along the way, and they're going to provide me not only a beautiful wedding day experience, but a really intimate, amazing, empowering, enriching engagement experience. There's so much value to that. So where do I see the wedding industry going in 5 years? I really hope it moves towards that, towards giving couples a more authentic experience that focuses on why they're doing it in the first place, not so much on how much they're spending or the glitz and glamour of that big day.
You know, we probably are over time, and we need to probably end the conversation, at least the one online for now. But I sure would like to have you back on again if you'd be open to it, especially given the amount of chatter in the chat room and
I'd be
online.
honored.
That would be great. And one little thing to kind of fill you in on, and the folks listening in, it's kind of a fun little deal. Some of you guys who were part of Escalate Live this past May here in Newport Beach, we remember that I was in a conversation on stage with Jeremy Cowart. He's a celebrity portrait photographer and also does humanitarian work. And I was on stage, and I had a chance when I was on stage to share this image. It's the only existing image of my dad, and some of you guys have seen this on my website, and it's let me see if I get this right. So it's my dad, my brother, and I'm the naked guy in the corner. And this is a very significant image to me for a lot of different reasons. And recently, Jeremy was true to his word and chose to come to my house, and we reshot this image, except for this time I was the dad, and my 4 kids got in bed with me as kind of a redemptive deal, because my father passed about a week after this image was taken, and it's the only one I have of he and I in the same frame. And it's such a cool deal because I just saw the proofs of it today, and just blown away by not only Jeremy's talent, but the meaning of the images behind it, and it's informing so much. And I thought of it as a real encouragement, not just for me, but as for all of you guys who are listening, whether you're slugging it out on Saturdays, or you're doing portrait work throughout the week, or you have a whole different genre that you're a part of, or you're not even a photographer, you're just someone who's providing this kind of a remembrance, however you do it. It is so significant what you're doing for people in their lives, and I don't want you to miss that. For me, if I didn't have this image, I'd be pretty sad. And not only do I have this, but now I have new images that we all get to keep creating, and that's what Jeremy did for me. So I just want to say that as an encouragement for those of you guys who are listening. And I also wanted to give a quick little sneak peek. We are going to continue with Escalate Live. We're going to do an event, and this is not official yet. It's going to be official probably the next 3 or 4 days, we hope. But Escalate Live Portrait is going to be happening in Illinois on October 4th and 5th. And this is a soft launch. We just want to leak it a little bit. But it's going to be a very special event. Some of the speakers involved will be Tamara Lackey, Lauren Nordstrom, Vicky Toffer, Julia Woods, and it's looking like we may get Julianne Cost again, and I get to be kind of the Ryan Seacrest guy. But it's going to be a very special event, and I want you guys to stay tuned for that, and I hope you'll join us. And again, that's just an announcement, but Lara, I can't thank you enough for being on today's show.
Thank you.
What you're doing we just need leaders in our... Yeah, we need leaders in our industry, and I think that whenever I find one, I see one, I'm drawn in, and I feel like we're part of a fraternity together, and it's just a gift to become friends with you. So I'm hoping that this is going to be the beginning of a nice long friendship.
Absolutely.
So thanks again.
I look forward to it.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for tuning in. If this was valuable for you, please be sure to send a hello to Lara, and also I don't mind the affirmation either. Dane Sanders is great, but we'll see you guys next week. We're signing off for now. I'll be at Skiff Summer School next week. So if there's anyone from Skiff Summer School that you'd like to hear from on Tuesday afternoon, go ahead and Twitter that information my direction with @Dane Sanders attached, and that'll let me know who on that roster. And if you're going to be at Skiff Summer School, please give a shout out and let me know you're going to be there. I'd love to get some time and hang out. I'm speaking on Sunday night, but I'll have some time all day Monday, and we'd love to connect. So
one thing,
that's it for now. Thanks again, Lara, for being on the show, and we'll see you guys next time. Yes?
One thing.
Yes.
I'm doing actually a branding and how to get published workshop on August 24th, and it's livewithlara.com.
When?
August 24th, live online. And I definitely want to offer a discount to anyone that's watching the show today. So if you're watching today, send me a Twitter message, and I would be happy to give you a special Ask Dane discount code. So I look forward to it.
That's great. Well, before we sign off, I want to go on the record, Lara. Before we got on the show, I wanted to check in to see if there's anything that we could promote, and I didn't know this was coming. So this is great. So say it again so people catch it.
Sure.
What exactly is it? When is it happening? And how can they get involved?
I've had a lot of people request, so it's going to be my first online intensive, and it'll be all about how to get published and branding
Great.
and how those two really relate to each other. So that's August 24th from 1 to 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, right at your computer screen, and it's livewithlara.com. So send me a Twitter message, tell me that you watched the show today, and I will send you a special code to use.